let me express the horror and grief so many Americans at the heinous assassination of Charlie Kirk have felt.
Violence, which affects so many different people of so many different political persuasions, is an affliction of America. And coming together is what we ought to be doing, not pointing fingers of blame.
This is Today as It Happened. Good Thursday evening to you. I'm Holly Furfer, here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day, including the fallout over the assassination of Charlie Kirk and the school shooting in Evergreen, Colorado. So let's get to it. Conservative activist Charlie Kirk shot and killed Wednesday at a Utah college event. He was speaking at Utah Valley University when a single shot rang out from a rooftop. The 31-year-old founded the youth organization Turning Point USA and was a close ally of President Trump. Utah's governor called it a political assassination. All right, our national correspondent Stephanie Liebergen is live for us in Washington. And Steph, we know that he was a close political ally to President Trump. What did the president have to say, and what are people saying in Washington this morning?
Reaction in Washington, D.C. to the death of conservative influencer Charlie Kirk was swift and bipartisan. There was an outpouring of concern and prayers from Republicans and Democrats in the immediate aftermath of Kirk's shooting. Members from both sides of the aisle also noted political violence should have no place in America. Now, Kirk was a conservative firebrand. His organization, Turning Point USA, advocated for conservative causes at high schools and on college campuses. And many Republicans noted that his events encouraged open dialogue, and he would be taking questions from the left and the right.
He was ironically trying to engage, whatever you think of his views or my views, he was trying to engage in civil discourse on college campuses and invite people opposing views and just to go back and forth and have a debate. We ought to be able to debate and have dialogue and go to college campuses without fear of, this kind of attack.
The shooting is also raising concerns and fears about political violence. Just a few months ago, 2 Democratic state lawmakers and their spouses were shot in Minnesota, now a prominent Republican speaker. At least one Republican member of Congress is noting that politicians on both sides of the aisle have a responsibility to turn down the rhetoric.
All of our elected officials have a responsibility to think long and hard about how they engage on these issues, how they talk about these issues. We can duke it out, we can have political disagreement, we can vote our conscience. But the rhetoric that is constantly used to demean each other, and both sides are painfully guilty of this.
All right, Washington correspondent Stephanie Liebergen for us there from D.C.
Can we get your reaction to President Trump blaming the radical left for what happened to Charlie Kirk yesterday?
Well, look, the bottom line is this is a time that all Americans should come together and feel and mourn what happened. Violence, which affects so many different people of so many different political persuasions, is an affliction of America. And coming together is what we ought to be doing, not pointing fingers of blame.
This moment requires leadership that brings the American people together as opposed to trying to further divide us. Political violence in any form against any American is unacceptable, should be denounced by everyone, and moving forward, we have to figure out a better way to come together, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as Americans.
Whether it is a member of Congress, whether it is the President of the United States, to assume and assert and cast blame when the FBI has failed to even apprehend the assailant is absolutely an irresponsible action. We must come together. Our responsibility is to de-escalate this environment, to reduce the level of chaos.
In Colorado, Jefferson County Public Schools have canceled all classes today in the wake of a shooting there at Evergreen High School. A male student opened fire, shooting 2 other students before turning the gun on himself.
Buses filled with students and staff.
There were a lot of kids inside the school who saw it.
Drove down the hill from Evergreen High School one after another to be reunited with the people they love.
We got to fix this. It's our turn. We got to fix it.
The first call came just before 12:30, reporting a school shooting, shocking this mountain community.
The nation is tired of statements filled with platitudes of thoughts and prayers.
3 teenagers were shot and taken to the hospital. One of them was the suspected shooter, who investigators say shot himself and died from his injuries.
The weapon used today was a handgun. We did determine that we have multiple scenes at the school. We have some scenes inside the school where some shootings occurred, and then outside the school as well.
Those with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office are leading the investigation and say there was no school resource officer on campus at the time of the shooting.
Jeffco was on scene within 2 minutes, and we were in contact with the shooter within 5.
With several crime scenes, the witnesses, students, and staff will be critical in this investigation.
Those interviews are going to help us figure out where it started and where it went next and where it ended up.
No child should ever face this kind of danger, and no community should be asked to absorb this kind of pain.
The superintendent for Jeffco Public Schools speaking directly to her community.
Violence involving our young people should never be normalized, and we must face the difficult truth that too often it is.
A community where everyone is holding one another a bit tighter tonight.
I'm incredibly blessed that I get to hug Brenner tonight and put him to bed and see him wake up tomorrow. Not every parent is that lucky.
Paulette Bordelon, Denver 7.
Coming up on Today as It Happened.
Mr. Speaker, in light of additional information in emails written by Peter Mandelson, the Prime Minister has asked the Foreign Secretary to withdraw him as ambassador to the United States.
Welcome back to Today as It Happened. Let's check back in on our daily briefing of the top stories.
Mr. Speaker, in light of additional information in emails written by Peter Mandelson, the Prime Minister has asked the Foreign Secretary to withdraw him as ambassador to the United States. The emails show, Mr. Speaker, that the depth and extent of Lord Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein is materially different from that known at the time of his appointment. In particular, Mr. Speaker, Lord Mandelson's suggestion that Jeffrey Epstein's first conviction was wrongful and should be challenged is new information.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has fired the UK's ambassador to the United States over his ties to convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Peter Mandelson was removed from his post after emails surfaced this week showing he encouraged Epstein to fight for early release from prison. Scripps News international correspondent Ollie Barrett live in London for us with the latest. And Ollie, why was Mandelson fired now, and what exactly is in the emails that would bring this on?
Well, Holly, as you say in the emails, is Peter Mandelson suggesting to Jeffrey Epstein after his original conviction that he believed, Peter Mandelson, that the conviction was a wrongful one, should be fought, and that he should fight for early release from prison. Now, Peter Mandelson had admitted previously that he was wrong, he says now, to have maintained any kind of relationship with Jeffrey Epstein after his initial conviction. But what is new in these emails is Lord Mandelson on paper saying that he believes that the conviction was wrong in the first place and should be challenged, and really offering fulsome support to Jeffrey Epstein. And so, as I say, the Prime Minister is describing this via a government statement as materially different information than he had previously been aware of. Prime Minister Keir Starmer had been under pressure for a period of time over Lord Mandelson's links to Jeffrey Epstein, but he had resisted that pressure to fire Lord Mandelson, and so really moving to change the ambassadorial post to Washington ahead of next week's state visit by Donald Trump, because precisely of the further detail in those emails that was released overnight, which has embarrassed Lord Mandelson, embarrassed the Prime Minister, and now led to further questions about the Prime Minister's judgment and the initial vetting process, which allowed Lord Mandelson to take up this role in Washington.
And Ollie, as you mentioned, President Trump is going to be visiting next week over at the UK there with you. So any impact that this potentially could have on UK-US relations?
Well, the immediate impact is that Lord Mandelson will not now be handling the final preparations for that state visit. He was considered by London to be a real asset in Washington with regards to planning the state visit, but also in fostering positive ties between Donald Trump's administration and the Keir Starmer administration here in London. And that's perhaps why the Prime Minister resisted for longer than many of his supporters would have liked the calls for him to sack Peter Mandelson. So there will now be an interim UK ambassador to the United States called James Roscoe, who will handle the preparations for the state visit. The other element to this, of course, is there is now the potential for headlines around Jeffrey Epstein and his relationships with Peter Mandelson and potentially, of course, with President Trump to in some ways overshadow that state visit. We would expect there to be a joint press conference at some point during that visit here by President Trump to the UK next week. If we do get a joint press conference, are journalists going to ask President Trump about Jeffrey Epstein, and is he going to like that? Is he going to appreciate that being part of the conversation in the background around the state visit? So it does have the potential to really disrupt some of the preparations ahead of that state visit. And Downing Street, as I say, perhaps that was partly why it was resisting sacking Lord Mandelson until it got to the point it felt it had no choice.
All right, Ollie Barrett in London for us. Thank you for that update, Ollie. Up next on Today As It Happened.
I'm pleased to announce that I will soon be awarding Charlie Kirk posthumously the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
You're watching Today As It Happens, Scripps News rundown of the biggest events and stories of the day. So let's jump right in. All right, President Trump speaking now at the Pentagon on this 9/11 anniversary. Let's listen.
Before we begin, let me express the horror and grief so many Americans at the heinous assassination of Charlie Kirk have felt. Charlie was a giant of his generation, a champion of liberty, and an inspiration to millions and millions of people. Our prayers are with his wonderful wife, Eric, and his beautiful children. Fantastic people they are. We miss him greatly, yet I have no doubt that Charlie's voice and the courage he put into the hearts of countless people, especially young people, will live on. I'm pleased to announce that I will soon be awarding Charlie Kirk posthumously the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The date of the ceremony will be announced, and I can only guarantee you one thing, that we will have a very big crowd, very, very big. Thank you, my fellow Americans. 84 years ago this morning, the banks of the Potomac were filled with the clamor of construction workers who broke ground on the building now known as the Pentagon on September 11th, 1941. At the time, it was the biggest building ever built. From that moment forward, this structure stood as a monument to American strength, power, and cherished American freedom. Exactly 6 decades later, on September 11th, 2001, those same walls, built with the sweat and muscle, blood of our parents and grandparents, were scarred by flame and shaken by terror as our country came face to face with pure evil. On that fateful day, savage monsters attacked the very symbols of our civilization. Yet here in Virginia and in New York and in the skies over Pennsylvania, Americans did not hesitate. They stood on their feet and they showed the world that we will never yield, we will never bend, we will never give up, and our great American flag will never, ever fail. That terrible morning 24 years ago, time itself stood still. The laughter of school children fell silent. The rush of our traffic came to an absolute halt. And for 2,977 innocent souls and their families, the entire world came crashing down so suddenly. In the quarter of a century since those acts of mass murder, 9/11 family members have felt the weight of missed birthdays and empty bedrooms, journals left unfinished and dreams left unfulfilled. To every member that still feels a void every day of your lives, the First Lady and I unite with you in sorrow. And today, as one nation, we renew our sacred vow that we will never forget September 11th, 2001. Amid the horror of that morning, some used cell phones and office lines to whisper their final words to those who mattered most. They whispered indeed. At 8:59 a.m. aboard United Flight 175, Brian Sweeney called his wife, Julie. He told her, "Do good. Go have good times. I totally love you. I'll see you again. I'll meet you up there." 4 minutes later, his plane hit the south tower of the World Trade Center. At 9:12 a.m. aboard American Airlines Flight 77, Renee May called her mom. Just the day before, Renee had learned that she was 7 weeks pregnant, but she never got the chance to share the news. She simply said, "I love you, Mom." 25 minutes later, Renee's plane struck the Pentagon. So violent, a strike it was. At 9:53 a.m. aboard United Flight 93, Elizabeth Waineo called her stepmom. They're getting ready to break into the cockpit. What do I do? I love you so much. They're going to break in. 10 minutes later, Flight 93 ended in the hallowed field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. At 10:25 a.m., Tom McGinnis was trapped on the 92nd floor of the North Tower when he told his wonderful wife, Elena, on the phone, "There are people jumping from the floors above us. If we get out of here, it'll be a total miracle. I love you, darling. Take care of Caitlin, beautiful daughter." 3 minutes later, the tower fell. Out of the ash, we witnessed the awesome power of that incredible love. We've seen it rise again. Out of the wreckage, we watched unbelievable courage suddenly take form. And out of the darkness, we saw the timeless truth of American character shine for the world to see. In America, we take blows, but we never buckle. We bleed, but we do not bow. And we defy the fear, endure the flames, and emerge from the crucible of every hardship stronger, prouder, and greater than ever before. Last year, we were a dead country. Now we have the hottest country anywhere in the world. In New York, there were heroes like Chuck Costello, a 46-year-old elevator mechanic, and a member of the Knights of Columbus. He selflessly ran into the World Trade Center to free people trapped in the elevators. His body was not found until the following January, deep under the debris. While going through his belongings, Chuck's widow, Mary, a phenomenal woman, discovered a personal prayer written in his own words, "Help me to light the way for those in the dark, and when I enter the darkness, let me not panic, but patiently wait to remember the light." Beautiful words. When the time came, Chuck ran boldly into the darkness of hell on earth, and now he shines in the light of heaven above. We remember him this morning. That day we learned that the American heroic spirit was all around us. We saw it in the police officers, the great firefighters, the service members here at the Pentagon, and in the hearts of every American who answered history's call. One such hero was Army Sergeant First Class Steve Workman, who was on the edge of the impact zone when this incredible Pentagon was hit. He was right there. After leading hundreds of people to escape routes, Steve turned back and plunged into the inferno itself. Pushing through the debris, he came upon a severely burned Navy lieutenant, the only survivor from the Navy Command Center. Only one. The wounded lieutenant looked into Steve's soul and said, "Don't let me die." Steve replied, "I won't. I've got you. Just hang on." He wheeled the lieutenant out of the wreckage on the back of a maintenance cart before getting in the ambulance and taking him to Walter Reed Hospital. That man Steve saved, Lieutenant Kevin Schaefer, went on to join the elite team of CIA operatives who located Osama bin Laden. Steve, you're an American hero. We appreciate it. We appreciate what you've gone through. Please stand. May God bless the memories of those who died and the heroes who fought and the soldiers who still stand watch. May God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Coming up on Today as It Happened.
Each side views the other side not just as a political adversary, but rather as an existential threat to our freedoms and to our liberty and to our country. Both sides feel this way about the other.
Welcome back to Today as It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer, here with your daily rundown of today's top stories.
South Korea's president saying Korean companies will likely hesitate to invest in the U.S. unless Washington improves its visa system. The president speaking after U.S. authorities released 330 workers detained in that Georgia immigration raid last week. More than 300 South Koreans were among those arrested at a Hyundai battery factory that was being built there. The workers are boarding a charter flight back to South Korea today. The president saying the current visa system makes it difficult for Korean companies to send their skilled workers to the U.S. to build those industrial sites. The next time you go on a flight, pack your electric toothbrush in your carry-on luggage. That's the word from the TSA. Has to do with those lithium batteries that power those toothbrushes, which carry the risk of igniting and setting things on fire. By packing the toothbrush in the cabin, they can be better watched and the crew can react swiftly. The blame game is already in high gear. The deadly shooting of Charlie Kirk is yet another reminder of the fact that political violence is only getting worse, as is the rhetoric. From then candidate Trump's assassination attempt, the hammer attack on Paul Pelosi, the killing of a Minnesota lawmaker, and way back to the shooting of Congressman Steve Scalise and Gabby Giffords. This country has seen an uptick in these types of events. Let's go live now to a group trying to fight against the extremism on both sides. Troy Williams is the executive director of Equality Utah. And Troy, your thoughts, first of all, on what unfolded on the campus of Utah Valley University yesterday.
We all feel deep grief and sorrow for what happened yesterday. The political violence that we witnessed was evil, and it is imperative that Americans, regardless of our political backgrounds, that we emphatically denounce violence in all of its forms. We have students that are affiliated with Equality Utah on campus who were there. My cousin is a student there, and they're all feeling deep grief and sorrow as well.
Troy, the left blames the right. The right blames the left. Who's right and who's wrong? And without pointing fingers, there seems to be enough blame to go along. But I want you to listen to Congressman Derek Van Orton just yesterday, live on our air.
The Democrat Party, every single member of that party that is putting out politically violent statements, and so many of them have, should be censured, and they should be removed from every single one of their committees, or more people are going to die.
Troy, those statements right after the shooting yesterday, and as I indicated, I've been watching coverage on all of the networks, and both sides can't go within 5 minutes of pointing the finger at each other.
No. America, we got to rise up, and we have to be better than this. We have to transcend these political divisions, because the simple truth is that we have people that we love on all sides of the political conflict. I have family members who are deeply conservative. I'm more progressive, but I have family members that were on campus, and I feared for their safety. We are Americans, and here we are Utahns, and we have to find a way to transcend. That's what American pluralism is all about. When it's at its healthiest, we're working through conflicts, we're coming together across divides, but at our worst, we're picking up a gun to resolve those conflicts. And look, I feel when the Pulse shooting happened in Florida, when the Club Q shooting happened in Colorado, it sent a ripple of fear throughout LGBTQ Americans. This has created the same kind of ripple of fear for conservative Americans, for Americans of faith who saw themselves reflected in Charlie Kirk's work. And so I know I've been reaching out to my conservative friends and just extending love to them, compassion, seeing the humanity of each other. This isn't a moment to take cheap political shots. We need to actually reach out to each other and connect across our humanity if we're ever going to solve these problems.
Troy, then how do you have a dialogue without resorting to, I guess, violence, if sometimes what you're dealing with is not a question of whether or not who's right or who's wrong, but what's fact and what's not? I mean, after all, we have been for the last 8 years in a climate of what do they call it? Fake facts.
And a growing culture of contempt, where each side views the other side not just as a political adversary, but rather as an existential threat to our freedoms and to our liberty and to our country. Both sides feel this way about the other. And of course, these divides are exacerbated by social media algorithms that reward conflict entrepreneurs, a lot of partisan cable news networks that just sow division that pits one group of Americans against another. And we've got to evolve past it. And part of that means reaching out to people who don't share your political views and having conversations, not with the intent of maybe changing their minds or winning an argument, but just simply to understand where someone is coming from. Utah has a good track record of doing this on many difficult issues, and I hope that the good model that we've set resolving other conflicts can be used in this moment. I'm reaching out to conservatives. I'm reaching out to people of faith. I'm letting them know that I'm there for them. I care for them. And I think when you show people that you really do care for them, then we can begin to have a conversation. Then we can begin to have look for solutions to these kinds of problems.
Excuse me for being skeptical, though, but if neither side acknowledges their contribution to the crisis, are we doomed to repeat yesterday over and over and over again?
Yes, we are. That's absolutely right. So if we just dig in, if we just double down with our side, with the people who agree with us, and we see ourselves as victims, and we don't see within ourselves the power to connect with other people, if we don't have the curiosity or the compassion to reach out to people who feel and think differently than we do, then yes, there will be more political violence. We will resolve conflicts with guns, as opposed to resolving them as James Madison wanted us to do in the legislative process, where factions of Americans come together, work out their issues within the legislature, within systems of government, so that they don't take the violence out to the streets. We've lost that, and we're losing that in this country, and we've got to find our way back.
So you brought up the issue of guns. Does the debate matter when there are so many guns out there that gives millions actually the opportunity to pull the trigger out of anger on just about any subject?
Yes, and here in Utah, you can walk onto a college campus with a concealed weapon, and no one will stop you. And so the accessibility of these weapons without real genuine safeguards makes it all the more fraught. We're all living in a state
Troy, there you go, trying to take away my Second Amendment right to bear arms, just like I thought you would.
Well, look, I mean, we all have to be able to see our blind spots, and we all have to be able to see, where we're dogmatic, where we have ideologies that refuse to see the sort of dignity and the liberty of the other side, and we all have to be able to sort of come to the table and say, hey, what about my point of view am I not seeing? And I think until we look at all of these factors, whether they're mental health issues, the breakdown of political discourse, the easy access to weapons. All of these things are factors in what happened yesterday.
So what happens when the person who has the biggest bully pulpit happens to be the President of the United States? And I go back to the campaign, and I remember them escorting a man out of the arena, and he says, "Knock him out."
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm not a supporter of the current President of the United States, and I think that the example that he has set has had a toxic impact on our democracy and on our culture. And I am very afraid of what kind of the ripple effect of his style of leadership is having on our ability to really solve these kinds of conflicts. It is a deep concern, and I think we as a country have to elect better, more responsible, more ethical and moral presidents.
Can I ask a question I asked Andrew Rafferty, our senior political director, yesterday as this crisis was unfolding, which is so many people say this is not who we are. Is this actually who we are?
No, it's not. I mean, we've been here before in this country. I wasn't born yet, but I've read about the 60s when there was a climate of multiple political assassinations. Dr. King, President Kennedy, Senator Kennedy, the Vietnam War, thousands coming home or not coming home, great civil unrest. And somehow as a country, we found our way through. Somehow we found a way to sort of grow ourselves back together. And it's much more difficult now when you have a president stoking these divisions from the White House. It's much more difficult now with social media algorithms driving this conflict. But this is a moment for Americans to really do deep soul searching. Who are we? Do we want to continue this culture of contempt where we hate the other side? Or do we want to rediscover a culture of compassion, of true healthy American pluralism, where we don't have to agree on everything, but we do have to come together and find common ground where we can and seek to work to find solutions together. And it is leaders in government, in the Senate, in the Congress, and from the White House who have to model this kind of behavior on all sides. We have to, because the alternative is more violence. This is not the end of this. This will only continue unless our leaders show and model a different way forward. And of course, we as Americans have to demand that of them, and we have to elect people who can lead us in a better direction.
Troy Williams, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Up next on Today As It Happened.
More people have died from health illnesses linked to 9/11 than those who were killed in the attacks. I'm Katie Tubman. Coming up, how 9/11 survivors are fighting to keep a federal health program alive.
Glad you're back with Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. All right, let's get right back into our rundown of the top stories of the day.
Each year, thousands of people gather here at Ground Zero to commemorate the lives lost on September 11th. Among them, survivors who are now calling on Congress to not forget the lives that can be saved today.
For countless survivors in the 9/11 community, living is a constant reminder of that painful day.
9/11 didn't end on 9/11.
Michael Barish represents first responders and civilians like himself who returned to Ground Zero within weeks of the terror attacks on September 11, 2001.
We were told the air was safe to breathe. Remember that? The EPA assured us. They said they wanted to reopen Wall Street. I get it. They said to the kids, come back to school. They said to the downtown residents, it's safe, come back to your homes. They said to people like me whose office is on Park Place, come back to your offices. Let's reopen Wall Street. And we did that. We did our patriotic duty. And guess what? It was not safe.
Barish was eventually diagnosed with prostate cancer through the World Trade Center Health Program. But the program has been endangered by staffing and funding cuts by the Trump administration. Despite having diagnosed early, thousands of people with at least 69 cancers linked to toxins that filled the air for weeks after the attacks.
They diagnosed these cancers earlier than would otherwise be caught. And that can make the difference between catching something at stage 1 versus stage 4 cancer. So the health program saves lives.
We were there on Capitol Hill when Barish, along with first responders and other 9/11 survivors, lobbied Congress this spring to approve additional long-term funding for the health program and reverse major cuts carried out by DOJ earlier this year. Although the program is authorized until 2090, Congress has had to vote several times to approve additional funding to keep it from running out of money in light of rising healthcare costs and increased enrollment.
Where does the fight for the World Trade Center health program currently stand?
That health program is in danger of running out of money and not being able to accept new patients in 2 years. And people aren't going to stop getting cancer in 2 years. I lose 2 clients a day, Katia. It's heartbreaking. But what would be worse is if the health program didn't exist.
To this day, more people have died from illnesses linked to 9/11 than those who died during the attacks, and more people are getting diagnosed with cancer. Still, Barish says many more people have lived because of the program, which provides free annual health screenings and treatment to more than 130,000 people across the United States.
What is your hope for the future?
So my hope is that we will never have to go back to Washington after this year, that Congress will do the right thing, provide the full funding that the health program needs so that the 9/11 community can receive what they were promised: health care, monitoring, and compensation if, God forbid, they get sick.
Earlier this year, we joined Barish, first responders, and other members of the 9/11 survivor community as they went to Washington to lobby Congress. They'll be headed back to Capitol Hill soon, hoping to garner more support, and we'll be keeping updated on their progress. Katia Tubman, Scripps News Group, New York.
You're watching Today As It Happened. We'll be back in just a moment.
Air Force Two will carry Charlie Kirk's remains to Phoenix, Arizona today. That is where he lived with his wife and 2 small children. Charlie Kirk was just 31 years old, a fairly new husband and father, his charisma attracting scores of young people in the conservative movement, which in turn caught the eye of then candidate Donald Trump. Scripps News Group Rachel Lewis-Just takes a look back at the life of Charlie Kirk.
Charlie Kirk first captured attention as a leader of young conservatives, but his work went on to reshape aspects of American politics and reinvigorate enthusiasm for Republicans.
We're organizing in the grassroots.
Charlie Kirk, a rare political powerhouse that was in the same age group.
Are we ready to win Arizona this Tuesday?
As the people he was trying to influence.
It's hard to think about someone as young as him, who is also as powerful and as visible as he is.
The conservative viewpoint politically, as embodied in the Republican Party, has had a difficult time attracting the under 25 voter. Charlie Kirk has somehow figured out a way to crack that code.
Kirk became popular for his visits to American universities.
I go to college campuses so you don't have to.
Where he debated students and advocated for right-wing ideals, rallying a more conservative generation in America.
By the way, who here was waiting in line overnight? We saw that. It was unbelievable. You're right up here, 24 hours in line. Because you know you are part of something bigger than yourself.
Kirk's influence accelerated in the last few years when Turning Point moved from an organization primarily focused on capturing youth enthusiasm and began its efforts to mobilize Republicans of all ages.
He pioneered a kind of almost must-watch spectacle for the MAGA movement.
It is no exaggeration to say Donald Trump may not be in office if not for Turning Point and what Charlie Kirk has created in that organization.
Kirk, criticized by one group and celebrated by another for the same ideals. He leaned into culture wars and pushed for a far more conservative America.
And do you want to do whatever it takes to save the country from these robber barons, from these ideological zealots, and these partisans that have been stealing our money, going after our children, and sending us into no-win wars halfway across the globe?
Kirk's Turning Point now has chapters on 850 college campuses. His legacy, political insiders tell me, only expected to grow after his death.
This feels like a moment of national cathartic attention so that everyone is stopping what they're doing and thinking about the act and what it means.
In Phoenix, Rachel Louise Just, Scripps News Group.
So let's take a closer look at the political landscape with Scripps News National Political Director Andrew Rafferty. And Andrew, on social media, reaction has been mixed, and that is putting it mildly.
Yeah, it has, Dell. And of course, as Rachel just outlined in her piece there, he was a polarizing figure. And there's been a lot of attention paid to specifically his ability or willingness to go to these college campuses like the one he was at yesterday and sort of go and mix it up with Democrats, people with different ideological views. But I think one of the things that should not be overlooked, and actually was pretty well documented in Rachel's reporting there, is his organizing premise, Del, because he was somebody who originally got into this, into politics with the idea that he was going to sort of take the best of what Democrats were doing with grassroots organizing in Barack Obama 2008, 2012, and sort of help to sort of transport that to conservatives, specifically young conservatives who he felt Democrats were, or young people who he felt Democrats were sort of taking advantage of, that they were in their corner on the Democrat side, but that there was an opportunity there for conservative ideas to penetrate in a way that they had not up until Turning Point Action was founded. And there is some evidence of the success of that. If you look at the 2016 election, 2020, and then 2024, there has been a pretty remarkable uptick in young people's support of specifically Donald Trump, because he was on the ballot for those elections, but conservative ideology to begin with. And it's not like a huge number from 2020 to 2024. I know Turning Point has their own numbers that they say are much more persuasive or much more dramatic. But in addition to that uptick in support for, in this case, Donald Trump, we also saw a steady decrease in support for the Democratic candidates, whether it was Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, or ultimately Kamala Harris last fall. And that sort of has helped erase those gaps between Republicans and Democrats when it comes to the support of young people. Of course, also a very polarizing figure, especially when on his points on race and abortion. Those have been circulating online over the past 24 hours or so, and in many ways helped sort of motivate Democrats who would kind of use that as passionate sort of motivation to go out and vote for liberal and democratic causes as well.
One thing that came out as a result of yesterday are calls on Capitol Hill for turning down the rhetoric. But on the issue of political violence, where do Americans stand?
Yeah, well, it is interesting, and Maura just was pointing out, who's on the ground in Utah for us, some of what experts are saying, political scientists, looking at the survey data. The encouraging thing here is that a majority of the country thinks this is a major problem right now. They think that more than 70% of Americans say that political violence is a significant problem.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening for Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. We hope you have a great Thursday night.